Yeah. Hello, and welcome to our talk, The Evolution of Ship Audio. Our talk is probably not as cool as the one on Microtech, but it's definitely going to be louder. Okay?
Cool. So, hi everyone, I'm Josh Bell. I'm a sound designer on CIG's audio team.
And my name is Yogi Klatt. I'm on the audio code team.
Cool. So we're just going to...
I love you too!
we're just going to show you a quick video of a quick video showcasing some of Star Citizen's ship audio from the past 3 months.
Is it louder than the commercial?
Thank you.
Thanks. So what we're going to talk about is the sound of ships and how we use it to give you a better game experience. And as such, we will just focus on the ships. We will not talk about UI sounds or ship computer voice or so. It's just about the diegetic sounds of the ships as you hear them in the game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. So, and the biggest step we did in terms of ship audio development was started in early 2018. Because at that time, the updated flight model was scheduled for development. I'm talking about the flight model that was released with 3.5 a couple of months ago. And this point was a really huge opportunity for the audio team to change a lot of stuff. Because we had a couple of problems with the old technology that we had. I mean, you all played, or some of you maybe played Star Citizen before 3.5, and you know the ships had sounds at the time, but we were not really happy with them. So they were working okay-ish, but they had a couple of problems. So because at that time, what worked good for Arena Commander was not good and scalable for a huge, vast, dynamic universe. And we're now going to talk about what kinds of problems we had back then. So we can separate our issues we had back then between code issues and design issues. On the code side, click. Thank you.
Very small.
Yeah, it's very small, yeah. The audio technology was mostly based on the old lumberyard audio tech for vehicles, and we usually just extended this. So we built more features on top of it, and this was working okay for a while. But at some point, it became quite apparent that we ran into a couple of deadlocks. No, what's it called?
Basically, just it wasn't having 10 ships playing at the same time was 10 times more expensive than playing one.
And we had no smart way to save calculations. So you can imagine if you had 20 ships in the scene, we had to do all the necessary audio calculations for every single of that ship in every frame, which means that one ship was okay, but 50 ships were 50 times more expensive than one ship. And this doesn't scale well when you have a big scene. Also, we could not hot reload existing data, which means a poor sound designer like Josh had to spawn or respawn a ship to actually see the changes in the game. Next. And then when you work on a code system and you just add features on top of it, we get something that we call spaghetti code, right? At some point, it becomes so huge and so hard to deal with that it becomes a maintenance problem. I remember a specific instance. I had to add one single feature to the old system, and it took me 3 days because it was just very hard to work with the old system. Yeah. But we also had design issues, right?
Yeah, so one of the main ones was the engine sounds were directly coupled to the particle effect, which means that if the VFX stopped triggering for some reason, like some bug, it would also stop the audio, and we'd get a lot of bugs, you know, like just wasting our time. You know, we'd look into it for quite a while and just figure out, oh, it's not our problem, but it kind of affects us.
Yeah,
But,
audio is missing. Oh, particles are actually missing.
it also wasn't great for us around sound support because we could only play sounds from the locations of the thrusters, and on almost all ships, the main thrusters and the loudest thrusters are directly behind you. So you got this really weird thing in 5.1 system, 7.1 system, where basically the whole sound of the ship was coming from behind you, which was physically accurate but not cool. You want to feel like you're enveloped within the ship, and there's all this stuff around you that's making sound. Also there's no conceptual distinction between inside and outside. We had some very hacky ways of, playing different sounds for the outside versus the inside, and we couldn't really do any really nuanced stuff with the ships. It was very basic, accelerate forwards, backwards, yaw left, right. We couldn't do the cool stuff that we do now, like changing the sound of the ship over time when you hold a certain speed, or all that kind of stuff. And the worst one was just the fact that it was all done in XML rather than dedicated tools. So you want to make a change to one of the ships, you've got to edit 30 different XML files.
Like in 2003, right?
Yeah.
So it looked like that, right? And
that's how we felt.
Um,
and this is how we looked.
Yeah. So we were kind of unhappy with the old tech. So at this point, we took a good look what we had at the moment and what we wanted to do in the future. And essentially, we set out some new high-level goals that the new audio tech for the new flight model should offer us, right? So the first thing is, obviously, we want more power for the sound designers, right? We want no XML editing. We instead want to use what you see on the shot there. We wanted to use existing tools that we had in the company, which means DataForge for data management and the Lumberyard editor for in-game editing. And we also wanted to massively reduce the amount of time that it took to set up a single, or especially a new ship, right? So it all comes down to we just wanted to work faster, which doesn't mean like, oh God, I have to rush, right? It just means that we wanted to have more efficient tools to use the existing time that we have to use it better.
Yeah, it's all about taking the time that we used to spend fixing bugs and trying to figure things out, and spend that actually making it sound good, which is what sound designers are there for, really. Yeah.
On the technology side, we also wanted to improve performance and scalability. I previously mentioned the problem that 15 ships are 15 times more expensive than one ship, and so this is a typical big space shuttle scene from Star Citizen. We didn't not just like spawn 150 ships in the scene, but we wanted to the audio tech to support these kinds of massive environments, right, with like 150 ships in the scene if necessary. And so then we only wanted, of course, to only play what is needed, because what you don't play doesn't cost any CPU time. Therefore, we wanted to avoid unnecessary calculations. What's the next slide? The stuff we already said. Yeah. So, but if we rework the tech, we also wanted to rework a little bit or take a good look at what we wanted to achieve in the future for the experiential side of working with the new tech on the ships.
So basically, we were really happy with the core sound design of the ships, like on an asset level. Like each of the manufacturers kind of had their own sound. All the ships within them were distinctive, like based on their size and stuff. So we were really, really happy with that. We just kind of wanted to, bring all of the potential out of the sound design that was already there by improving our implementation.
Yeah, and we knew quite early that the new flight model would offer a lot of cool new things for us, and we wanted to hook into these things. So we knew that something like, the new flight dynamics would be included, right? We would get drag calculations, we would get lift calculations, and these would allow us to add a lot of more nuances and detail to the audio environment of the ships. The ultimate goal was really just to not just put audio in there, but to enable everybody who's in that ship to actually listen to and know what the ship is doing. We wanted the ship to talk to the pilots and to the crew.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line was to make it believable, which is not to be confused with realistic. It's not all about simulating, exactly where the component is, what sound that would make, and all that stuff. It's about making it feel like you're in that ship, which is not necessarily making it realistic. We wanted every sound to be placed for a purpose and to actually come from a specific place in the ship, just to really enhance this sense of being in a big machine. Like the kind of sense that you get when you're in like a jet plane or something. It's not just you can't localize where things are. You just feel like you're in a big, heavy, powerful.
Yeah, and the sound's not coming just from the engine, it's coming from everywhere around you, right? Because the whole hull is shaking.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we asked ourselves, how do we create a great flight experience, or how do we make flying actually better? So what did we do? We went into research mode and checked a lot of research and reference materials, which meant for us, we were watching films. Good films to watch for that kind of stuff is, of course, Top Gun, right? Who doesn't know Top Gun?
A lot of the vibration stuff you'll see later was like inspired by The First Man, the film about the scene at the beginning where he's in that experimental test plane and he leaves the atmosphere and then comes back in.
Also a nice film for reference is Sully, because he's flying an F-4 Phantom and in a flashback scene, and there's also a lot of like shaky noises in the cockpit, and which really sell the flight experience, right? Okay, the other thing is, like, of course, we played other games, very stressful, and we started to talk to subject matter experts. And if you want to talk about flight with people, you talk to avionics technicians, people who work with airplanes, and with pilots. And luckily, our community has a lot of pilots. We got in contact with chopper pilots, with pilots from the Royal Air Force, with the Royal Navy, business jet pilots, general aviation pilots, so essentially the whole spectrum. And we interviewed all of them to tell us, hey, what do you think? How does it feel in the cockpit? What can you hear? What can you feel? How can we make this thing better? Yeah, so essentially we learned about flying. And then we, retreated in our cave and came up with a game plan. So we made our planning, did our work, and then we thought the best thing we could possibly do is to rewrite the complete audio code from scratch. This comes with pros and cons, right? On the con side, of course, it's a rather long task, right? Also, there's a high initial investment cost in this, and when you do this and you rework a whole bunch of systems that are already in place, you break the game, right? And for QA, this is very unsettling. When
I had to, I had people messaging me all the time, like, why is this ship so quiet? This one makes no sound. This one makes way too much. I can't even have my headphones on when I'm playing the game if I fly.
Why did you break it?
So I just had to send an email being like, please don't bug anything for the next 4 months.
But the pros are. The good sides of this are, obviously, we wanted to build a good foundation for the future, right? We didn't want to waste any more time on maintain old code. And the good side about this, if you make your tools nice, right, and really nice to work with, then you get less frustration on the game designer, on the sound designer side. And if you also accelerate the workflows, means they can spend so much time of their workday making cool things and not just fighting the tools that we have.
Yeah, more time to make it sound good.
Yeah. So what did we then? We joined the flight model team, so Colson, John Crew, etc., and went to work. And yeah, and the way how Josh and me worked were like, we essentially had full autonomy on this, right? So we got just do your stuff, make it cool, make it nice, and essentially the process was like that.
So Yogi, I can't play wind sounds on the canopy class.
Okay, let's talk about this. I do a quick prototype. Hey, would that work for you?
Yes. Insert wind.wav.
Yeah. So essentially, I got him a working prototype, and while he was already working with the data, I cleaned up the prototype, made it nice and shiny, and then we went on. And we worked like this for quite a long time. This is, of course, a little bit oversimplified, right? But it was actually the thing. We went into, like, at some days, I sent you like 5 or 6 custom builds from the game, just with new stuff to try out. Yeah.
Because we were given so much like autonomy and trust to like implement the things that we felt were needed, because we were the closest to the process that was going on. We kind of came up with ideas that we wouldn't have necessarily came up with if it was.
So thank you, audio leads. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So contrary to the way we did it in the past, we wanted to have a really layered approach where everything was like siloed. Each type of sound was like siloed into its own system. Just to make it easy to debug, easy to work on, easy to isolate something that's wrong. So these are thrusters, which is where all the audio was triggered from before. The ship audio component, which we use to trigger things, everything that is like a bit of machinery on the ship that is not a thruster. And then we also have things to simulate external physical forces on the ship, like vibrations from collisions and drag, and then like wind sounds and weather in the future. And then obviously passbys, and then just to help sell atmospheric flight that bit more, we added bespoke things for flying in a pressurized environment.
Yeah, and this was like the mock-up, like for the first iteration of the new flight model, which was released in 3.5. So all that stuff was already in there.
Yeah. So the first.
And now we're going to talk about each system individually, and we're going to show you videos with each of the systems soloed in the mix, right? So you only hear what sounds the specific category of subsystem plays in the game.
Yeah. So the first category is thrusters, which play sounds on each individual thruster, like differentiated by type, like MAV, main, retro, VTOL, and they play sounds on that thruster based on what that particular individual thruster is doing. And as we said, this was in the past the only way to trigger sound on a ship, and now it's just part of a larger system. And these are reactive to like heat, health, degradation, all that kind of stuff. And to help solve our like surround sound problem, where we only had stuff coming from mainly from the rear, we've kind of massively de-emphasized these, and we bring in all these other systems to help fill out the mix around you.
So just to say this again, when you see a ship flying far away, like 2 miles in front of you or so, you're not hearing the thrusters of the ship. You're hearing it like a simplified variation. Thrusters now are just detail, but when you get close to them, they have a lot of detail, way more than before. Yeah. Now, so okay. So this is not an adequate representation of.
The map thruster location's incorrect. I apologize.
No.
But this is where you typically find the sounds of thrusters, unsurprisingly, on the thrusters. And this is a video of just the thrusters soloed in the mix on the Gladius. So you're not hearing anything else but the sound coming from the maneuvering thrusters, the retro thrusters, and the main thrusters.
Okay, so the next component we're going to describe is the ship audio component. This is the component that is actually interfacing with the new flight model, and it gives us all it generates a lot of noises which are not thrusters, which are little helper objects in the cockpit that try to sell the experience better. Next. Right. So essentially, the IFCS gives us like a lot of like numbers we can just query, and query really, really fast, which are different rotation rates of the ship, the velocity, the age of the ship, so wear and tear also plays a role in here, the acceleration, the health itself, because we want to tell everything on the ship like, hey man, the ship is quite unhealthy and it's going to die soon, so we want everywhere on the ship or everything on the ship to sound really rattly and broken then.
Yeah, and the cool thing is we can use all these parameters generated by the ship audio component from the flight model to change the sound of basically anything on the ship. So we use this quite a lot to like change the sound of the room tone or the ambience based on like the ship health, how powered on the ship is, all this kind of stuff. And in the future, we can use age and all that kind of stuff. It'd be cool. Yeah. And part of this is vehicle audio points, which is the sound of everything else on the ship that isn't a thruster. So, we can place these really, really precisely in the editor, whereas in the past, we couldn't do that. So, you'd load up the ship level, you just kind of, look around the ship and think if you were sat there, where would you expect to hear something from? And then you can just, plonk it right on there.
And this also goes back to the thing when you're in an airliner, right? When you're flying, you hear maybe the main engines on the left and right, but the whole thing around you is also doing something, right? Like the airplane bangs and so on. So you hear something some creaks maybe in the hull somewhere. But it's not just the engines that make sound. And these vehicle audio points, they sell the idea that there's more. These are essentially proxy points for what the engines are doing without being the engines.
Yeah, like what it's doing to the frame and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
the frame of the ship. And this is the main thing that allowed us to massively improve our surround sound experience from 3.4 to 3.5. Yep, and this is where you typically find those on a ship. So you've got your vehicle audio points here. You just, as I said, you go around the ship and place them where you would expect to hear something, basically. And then you've got your ambience room tone, which is or just in the rooms around the ship, the sound of that room and the stuff within it.
How many would you place?
It depends on the size of the ship. But the Gladius has got 8 in the kind of dotted around the cockpit. In the Constellation, I don't know. Vehicle audio points 10, but ambient things, there's a lot more.
30, 40 something?
Yeah. So this is a video with the same flight pattern, just with the vehicle audio points stored in the mix. So you're not hearing the thrusters or vibration or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. External forces. So a big part of flying is not what the pilot does with an airplane, for example, but what nature does with the airplane. And this is really interesting. And this was a thing that was really missing in the past for us. So we, based on feedback from pilots, so we actually created 2 new systems for ships. One is, One is the vibration component, and one is the environment feedback component. So the vibration component is the thing that makes your ship sound vulnerable, right? So you can imagine, if you're getting a collision, or if you're getting a lot of lift or drag from when you're flying through the atmosphere, then this will induce vibrations in the ship. And Josh is using these vibrations to create rattles and creaks and stress noises.
Yeah.
And so they make you really feel, oh God, this is too much for the ship. This is gonna break apart soon, right?
Yeah. We've also got the environment feedback, which is used to simulate just to let the pilot know what kind of environment is outside of the ship. So we've got more static things, when you're in an atmosphere, you're in an atmosphere zone. So when you go fast enough, we play wind sounds on the canopy and on the ship body, but also more dynamically created ones, when you destroy a ship, it creates a debris zone, and that expands. And if you find your ship within that, then you hear that on your canopy and on your ship.
Yeah, it could be theoretically used for other things. It could be used for submarine things. If you crash your ship in the ocean, I know it doesn't work at the moment, but theoretically this component would also create the noises for that. Yeah. So it's set up to be really diverse.
It's really extensible. Any new kind of environment the player could find themselves in, we just have to add a zone, and then you could play the appropriate sounds for that.
You put this on the actor as well, right?
Oh yeah. One day I was just what would happen if I put this environment feedback component on the player's head, and then Yogi was like, well, just try it, it might work. And so I just plonked it on the player, and then put an emitter on each ear. So now when you stand on a planet and there's wind, you can hear the wind hitting the player's head, and if the wind's coming from the right, it's more powerful on the right ear, and same for the left.
This also works when you jump out of the ship, because you get more wind this way.
Yeah. So the way this works, we have set up a long list of different materials and the size of that material. So we'll go around and place a vibration point on a big metal panel in the cockpit of a Constellation, and we choose metal large, and we want one on the glass. Glass medium, and then when that sound needs to play, it will select the appropriate sound for that size of material and that material. And it's the same thing for the environment feedback points, so we just go like, wind, glass lodged, and when you find yourself in an atmosphere, it will just, it'll play sounds appropriate to that glass panel in the wind, and, we place them all around the body of the ship, different sizes of different bits that stick out and all that stuff.
Okay, let's take a look at this. This is just the components, or just the sounds for external forces.
So all of this stuff is, crucial to like really kind of grounding the ship and materializing the ship into the game world, so it feels more real and more physicalized. As you can see, the moment when the canopy opens, where then those are the wind sounds on the player's ears rather than the wind hitting the canopy in front of them. So obviously, if you're flying through the air at like 200 meters per second, even if you've got a helmet on and that's flying past your head, it would be incredibly loud. Yeah.
The audio Passby component. So we also separated out this component that was generating Passby noises. There's a lot of videos on YouTube or so where like an avatar or like a player stands on top of a planet, on a mountain or so, and a ship whizzes by, right? These things were not working properly in the past. I don't know if you remember, but you would trigger some of these flyby sounds, these things, right? On high-speed formation flying, for example, you fly with 1,000 meters per second forward and have your friend there, and you'd constantly hear like, it didn't work well, right, in all situations. So we reworked the system as well. It works now really good. And then we released it in 3.5, and we forgot to activate a checkbox. And then we got a little shitstorm at our hands because everybody was saying, "You broke the flyby sounds."
Yeah.
We broke them, but then we could repair them in a point patch.
It broke again later. I had to fix them again. Yeah. We also added additional sounds that trigger just when you're in atmosphere that are just kind of from the ship as a whole. Because all of the vibrations, environment feedback, vehicle audio points and thrusters all behave differently in atmosphere because they have to fight through the medium. But we just found that in itself didn't really completely sell it, so we add a bunch of sounds for the ship using stuff like terrain height to kind of give the feeling of the sound of the thrusters reflecting off the ground as you get lower. And just special effects for low altitude flying. Both of these are just triggered from the ship as a whole, right there. And this video we're going to show you is just with all of the special atmospheric sounds soloed in the mix. So this is not the thrusters, no vibrations, no wind, nothing like that. Just the kind of special effects that we add based on what kind of atmosphere you're in.
So, another topic that we wanted to approach with the new technology is performance, right?
Yeah, so to solve the issue we had in the old system where every ship, there was no distinction between what was in, like we use the term NLPC, non-local player character. There was no distinction between what was your ship and what was someone else's ship. Now we have that distinction, and to make it so that we're as scalable as possible while still sounding good, we have a separate set of sounds for NPC ships that are outside of a certain range. You know, these are completely different to the player ship sounds, but like still per manufacturer, per model, but they're a different set of sounds until you get within 150 meters of the ship, and then you get basically the same experience as if it was your ship. And so basically this allows us to have to calculate less parameters because we only need this small subset that we need to make these simplified sounds work. And the result is that, you know, a typical ship that isn't yours will use about 10% of the processing cost compared to your own ship. And this is kind of the philosophy that we use, is to try and go into as much detail as possible on the ship that you're in and use as little resources as possible on other ships while still making them sound good.
Yeah. And another thing, we did a couple of more tricks to improve the performance. One thing is we have different kinds of priority, priorities. A typical priority that we use for figuring out which ship in the screen is the most important one, is just to do a comparison between how much space does it take on the screen versus how far is it away. So we can make a good estimation of what kind of sound we actually need on the ship and what stuff we don't need. And then when we made these decisions, what we're going to need and keep, we just harshly color away everything else. What do you think? Just scream. How many ships can you hear at the same time in the game? Just shout.
5. Yeah. Yeah.
Not all of them, no. We're not going to go back.
It's like the thing in a film when you hear, you know, a group of people running. You can make out one person's footsteps, 2, 3, 4. But when it starts getting 5, 6, you'll just hear a crowd, and that's.
Yeah, and also this helps the mixing process a lot, because just tons and tons of ships which are audible, they will just create noise in the background. It's not nice and not easy to mix.
You would think hearing more would make it sound bigger, or there was more, but often it just makes it sound like a mess, and makes it sound like there's less ships.
Okay, yeah, we mentioned that before. We, based on that, we simply do not update data that we don't need. So if a ship is not audible, we don't care about it, and suddenly we have all the CPU budget available for something else.
So these simplified sounds play from the ship as a whole. We're going to show you a video with just a sort of dogfight scenario where you're only hearing the movement sounds of the NPC ships.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. That's a bit of a work in progress, and that's a very new thing. But the idea was just to make those sounds react to as few important parameters as possible, so you can quite easily tell if a ship's kind of coming towards you, moving away from you, accelerating in any direction, just from kind of modulating a very small set of sounds. So, this is everything we've went through. This is ship audio.
This is 3.5, the audio tech of 3.5.
Cool.
That's it.
And this is everything you've heard, but with nothing soloed, everything together, in the normal game mix. So.
Okay. So, oh, that's mixing, sorry.
Yeah, so a couple of other things that we do is dynamic mixing. So what people would often know as sidechaining, where you change the volume of one sound category based on the volume of another sound category. So, example, like we decrease the volume subtly of your own ship if an NPC ship is making a lot of noise, because then we'd assume that that's something you want to know to look at, or would be important to you. Also, things like when you fire your weapon, it'll subtly duck your ship sounds for a split second, so you know that your weapon's fired. Basically, just kind of drawing attention to what's important. And there's more things like we know which ships are the closest to you in like a ranked order. We know this also combined with the size of the ship, like which ships are targeting you, so we can give them a slight volume bump to draw your attention to them. Whether they're hitting you, and even whether they're friendly or an enemy ship, we kind of assume you'd want to know about the enemy ones more, so we bring up their volume slightly. And these are all really, really subtle things that you kind of wouldn't really notice in isolation, but if we were to take them away, the game would sound quite a bit worse.
Flat. It would sound really flat.
Yeah. Cool.
So.
Yeah, so adding new sounds to a ship is now extremely simple. Like 90% of the setup is done automatically by all of the ships just inheriting from one master spaceship record with all of the data that every ship needs already set up. We can place the points extremely accurately and quickly in the editor. We can audition vibrations in the editor by just saying, play a vibration of this force, what does that sound like, before we've actually gone through the process of exporting the ship. And basically, from the moment we export the sound from our digital audio workstation, where we create all of our assets, we can have it on the ship playing in the actual game within 2 minutes. And I've recorded a video of me doing that. So that's just a random sound that I've just grabbed that I just want to stick on this ship, just for the purposes of this. So I export it, and then I import it to Wise, which is our audio tool that we use at CIG, and then I put it into the event, and then I add a couple of RTPC behaviors on it. So what I'm doing is making the sound wobble a bit when you accelerate quickly. So, let's go through all this. Pick one from the big list of ship parameters.
Were you rushing it, or were you doing it like?
A tiny bit, but yeah, it is possible to do it this quickly if you know what you're doing. Come on, past Josh. Cool. Yep. Then I've done all that. I build the bank, go into the game, refresh the audio system, and then I choose where I want to place my sound. So place it there. I paste in my play triggers. I choose which RTPCs I need, which parameters from the flight model I need to use on that point to get what I want. Save it, export the ship, go into game mode, on the ship, and then I solo that sound so we only hear the new sound. There we go. And then, there it is. Sounds a bit strange in isolation, but yeah.
And how long took this previously?
Oh, much longer, like 10 minutes maybe before, yeah. All of our tools have generally just advanced in the time as well.
Yeah, so with that foundation done, we have a lot of things to look forward to. So essentially we're not done yet, right? So we have now a good foundation. We can do more extensions of the existing system and make them nicely interact with each other. And one thing we want to do in the future is a tighter link with the ship power system. So if you think about like you're in a room and like parts of the room, like in a ship, or let's say the backside of the ship is powered off, then we want the audio to reflect that. At the moment we cannot do this, but this will probably happen over the course of the next year.
Yeah.
Then
yeah, we want sound each specific ship component. So you could go up to your shield generator, and just by listening to it, then it would help give you a hint about that something was wrong with it. Same with power plants, life support, any kind of component that can perform well, perform badly, be turned off. We want to support it by having a sound placed on the component inside the ship from where it actually is.
And you've seen maybe on the ships there are slots, like maintenance slots, where later like shield generators and power generators can be put in. So we will hook into that as well. Another thing that's coming online next year is sound implementation, because we all know there's no sound in space, and this might be boring. And SoundSim is the thing that makes things audible in space. We actually have like a lightweight implementation of that already. So if you are in your ship and you turn off your sensors or take off your helmet, you will not be able to
turn off your sensors. You'll get a slight change. Yeah.
It's that there. Okay. Yeah, so and we will greatly expand the system in the course of the next year.
Now that we've got all this new technology, we want to kind of go back to the ships that were made really, really early on and have the sound design done really, really early on, and make like a hit list of ones to kind of extend, given all this new technology that we have, and that's just like a gradual, ongoing process. Yeah.
Okay. Also, of course, we want still to improve the flight experience. We think we're on a good path, but we're not done with that yet. So one thing we do more recently is to do real audio recordings. Maybe just tell the story about.
Oh well, you made the vibration components, and then it was all working really, really well, and then we had no content to put in it. So I had to very, very quickly come up with like a whole suite of different stress sounds and rattle sounds to cover the whole range of ship movement. And the only thing I had was my filing cabinet in my sound booth at work and my subwoofer. So I played a synthesizer through just the subwoofer and then kind of strapped that to the side of the filing cabinet and put different kinds of things in it, and annoyed everyone for like half a day. But yeah.
Can we
all of the vibration sounds in the game right now are my filing cabinet, but not for long. Yeah, we've planned to do some actual recordings of.
We have a video. The person with the mouse cursor, can you click on the lower left side of the screen? Okay, so have we messed up your immersion now?
Yeah.
No, but we will get nicer assets for that in the future as well.
Yeah.
Then a nice little private endeavor of mine is I went into flight school, and during the first couple of flights, I already noticed a couple of things, right, which could be used for the game, because you cannot turn off your developer brain. Can we have a click on the top left video, please? So that's me. I had a GoPro strapped to my head, and then this is like a silent video because I curse a lot during flying. But you get a good feeling about what's important for a pilot, right? And you get a good feeling about what can be done in the future to make the flight experience better. And I also recorded a couple of sounds which made in the keynote, right? So
I'll tell you which ones.
We'll probably go back and recording some gliders at some point because you get very pure wind sounds. But yeah, so we're going more out into reality to get some nice source material. We were at an air show recently, and we saw a display of a Rafale jet fighter, right? And this one is just like droning out everything around you in terms of audio. And I came back really, really excited. I was like, Josh,
turn it up.
Please make ships louder and make them more growly and all that. And this was directly fed into.
That's basically when we came up with the extra level of detail for atmospheric stuff.
So and this is like why the ships in atmosphere now sound like they are. So you just get a lot of good reference materials, right? So, but the most important thing that we can do and can get is your feedback. So if you are unhappy with your sounds, or if you, with our sounds, and if you want to give us feedback, may it good or be back, please leave us a message at Spectrum. While we cannot guarantee to answer everything, we read everything that you write to us, right? And please prefer Spectrum, because like this platform is not just for you; it's also for us developers to read what the community is thinking. So we're almost at the end of our talk. So as you can imagine, we're now in a much nicer place. And we have time for questions, I think. Do we have time for questions?
Can't see.
Person with microphone appeared. We have time for questions.
Oh.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm just wondering, how are you gonna sound alien ships? What kind of technique will you use for that?
Okay, so code side, it will be exactly the same technology. Sound design-wise, Josh.
Well, I recently did the Banu Defender, which was the first Banu ship that we've had in the game Flyable. It's basically just like you just come up with like a kind of it's like a sort of sound bible, you know, like a few keywords from the lore and all that sort of stuff to kind of inform what kind of sounds you pick. And it was very useful to kind of restrict what sounds you build the whole palette from. So I was kind of struggling with the Banu Defender in all honesty for a little while, and then I really dug down into this sound bible idea, picking a few keywords, picking sounds that fit that, and then restricting myself to just those sounds. And then, you know, just like put them all in a folder, 50 sounds, I can only use these for the whole ship. And by doing that, you force yourself to kind of, you know, do something unique for that, because you're not using stuff that's already been designed or any of that, you know.
So it's about like getting a good,
basically.
getting a good base for the sound.
And like we use the lore and, you know, how and the art to inform a lot of it and come up with keywords that we follow.
Yeah, so great job on the sound so far. I love it. When it comes to, is there any plan to implement a more event-based like effect, sort of like when you're breaking the sound barrier and make, what is it called, like a sonic boom? Or, for example, when you're landing with a spaceship that has wheels and you're like almost gliding on the surface, you're kind of missing that whole feedback from the ground. Is there any plan to implement that?
Sonic booms first.
Okay, to the sonic boom stuff, what you mentioned, that's it's a complex thing that is on our to-do list, but it's not very easy to do, because if you want to do properly, you need to take into account like different speeds of sound, because speed of sound is dependent on the temperature, on the density of the medium, and we don't know what we do when you, for example, well, think about it, you have a sound, right, and then you you accelerate so fast that you're going faster than the sound, and then you stop, and the sound catches you again. That might be very confusing for players, right? Also, if you imagine if you have like a dogfight far ahead of you, and you have like this delay between a sound happening or a visual explosion, and then you get the delayed feedback. There's player expectations, so it's not quite clear if the players will accept that. I mean, we had a chat at some point. I was like, oh, cool! This is so impressive, right? Like because we tested that. We tested like just like basic sound, speed of sound parameters, and we had a scene where a ship just exploded, and like a second later we had like, I was like, wow, this is powerful, and he was like, wow, this is shit, right? So it's kind of like it depends what you experience, and then we're not quite sure where we're going to go in this direction, but it is on our to-do list to do something about this.
Yeah.
And about the other stuff, like vehicle support, so most love so far went into our ship audio system, though we have a dedicated audio coder who is just looking at vehicle support. So there's going to be some.
I mean, we're always looking to improve the whole landing experience, like, you know, the feeling of the power of the ship. I don't think we've really quite sold that yet when you come into land. We're always improving that. And as for wheels, when, you know, if ships can ever land on a runway, then wheels.
Did you mean wheels on ships or wheels on like cars?
Yeah, wheels on ships, like when you land with a Avenger, or if you're using another type of landing gear where you're scraping towards the surface.
Okay, yeah. So obviously we want to have better support for that, but we're not there yet. But eventually it will happen.
Yeah, there, guys.
Yeah.
Great panel today. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Hello. How you doing? So, always been a big fan of the creaking sounds in particular.
Thank you.
Always thought they were really good. Now I know it's a filing cabinet. I really want to know what you're going to be using next instead. Perhaps a bigger filing cabinet or, I don't know.
Yeah,
What's the plan?
we just want to be, you know, as a start, get more materials and more like actual different, you know, because there's only so far you can go up in pitching up and down one filing cabinet before it just sounds like a bigger or smaller filing cabinet. We want to, you know, get more materials involved because it's not just metal inside of a ship. It's, you know, all these kind of composite plastics and like the kind of, you know, if you had like a glass pane that could resonate with, you know, it wouldn't be rattly, but it would kind of hum, that kind of stuff.
Also, when you land with a glider in the field, that's rattly. That's really rattly. So we're probably gonna.
Yeah,
add
just
some
getting
mics
more,
there.
just getting more sizes of materials, more materials in there, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Sweet, thanks.
Okay, that was sadly the last question because we run out of time. Thank you so much for watching
thank
that,
you.
and see you around.